Hi, I'm Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work, and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Welcome to this episode. I'm your host, Nikki Lowe, and today I'm reflecting on my lessons from 2021. If you're listening to this podcast when it goes live, we did it. We made it to the end of another year, a year that was still during a pandemic and continues to be one of the strangest and challenging times of our generation. And even if you're not listening to this when this episode goes live at the end of December 2021, know that what I share will hopefully be useful to you reflect on at any time. Many of us came into 2021 hoping that it would be better than 2020. But I don't know about you, but 2021 at times has tested me far beyond what 2020 did. And I didn't think that was possible. So it would be easy to walk away from this year and just close the door on it without looking back, hoping that we never have another year like this again. But as difficult as it's been at times, I think there are some deeply profound and important lessons that I want to take from this year. And my guess is that it's the same for you too. And if I walked away without reflecting on them, I'd lose the goodness in those lessons. And I didn't want to do that. And I don't want that for you either. So in this episode, I'm going to reflect on what my lessons have been. And I hope that they help you to reflect on what your lessons have been too. So we can carry what we need to into the new year and leave behind what we need to as well. So why do this? Naturally, I'm a very future-oriented person, almost too much sometimes. So it doesn't come naturally to me to reflect on the past. So it'd be really easy for me to rush into 2022 and not look back. But I'd miss all the lessons that this year has taught me. And if I'm honest, I'd end up making some of the same mistakes. And ultimately, at my core, I'm all about development of myself and development of others. And it's kind of how can we develop wisely if we don't take the time to reflect? And if you've been part of my community for a while, you'll know that emotional intelligence informs a lot of the work I do with my clients. I'm an accredited emotional intelligence practitioner. And the tool that I'm accredited to use actually measures 16 components of emotional intelligence. And one of the key elements of those 16 is reflective learning. And that's really the extent to which you're able to reflect on both yourself and others about how you feel, think, and what you do, and how you can alter your behaviour accordingly. So this reflective practice is so important for our personal development. And among all the challenges and heartache of this year, there have been so many lessons. And I wanted to go mining for the gold before saying goodbye to 2021. But before we dive in, could you do me a huge favour, please? Can you share this episode with 2 or maybe 3 working mums that pop into your head as you listen? My mission is to support as many working mums on their journey as possible. And I'd be so grateful if you supported them by offering this free podcast. I hope it's useful for you. And if it is, that you share it with others. And also, please consider rating and reviewing my show. Your review can help other people to find my podcast. So you'll literally be helping another working mum find this resource. And as you know, I love to go in and read the comments. So dive in there and let me know your feedback. I'd love to hear it. So let's get back to the life lessons of 2021. My first lesson is all about resilience. And I thought 2020 had tested my resilience, but I had no idea that it was just the tip of the iceberg as we came into 2021. This year, at times, has felt relentless for me. And I just wanted to share with you a bit of an overview of how the year flowed so you can get an insight into why I'm saying this. In January, a day after launching the Thrive Summit, which was a mammoth task, bringing together over 30 incredible female experts across the areas of well-being, relationships, finance, career, business, mindset, and lifestyle. And it was a phenomenal event. And I've had so much amazing feedback for the people who participated in it. So thank you for that. but it did test me getting it out there. I'd never done something like that before. And it was, it was a mammoth task. And the day after it went live, I started to feel unwell. And I just thought that I'd pushed myself too hard. And I had, but I didn't realise that there was more going on. Actually, the day after, when I started feeling unwell, a couple of days later, I thought, I'm just going to go and get a COVID test just to rule it out. I didn't think for 1 minute I'd got COVID, but I had. And then my husband tested positive. And then after we did our isolation, we tested my daughter before she went back to her childminder, and she then tested positive. So we had another 10 days isolating as a family, doing home learning. And so that really wiped out January for us. And we were then still home learning. So I was juggling my work around that. And then the children finally went back to school in the childminder. And I had about 6 weeks of what I would call normality. I'd got working days, my 3 working days that I was doing at that time, earlier in the year. We had those 6 weeks, which were also peppered with, Easter holidays, so it wasn't kind of straight 6 weeks. But then my son had an accident and severely fractured his leg, and he was put into plaster up to his groin. And so I was catapulted back into home learning and also being a full-time carer for him, because he couldn't go to the toilet, he couldn't get in and out of the bath or the shower on his own. And for the first 2 weeks, he didn't sleep because he was in such horrific pain, and it was absolutely horrendous. It was absolutely horrible time, added to kind of complete sleep deprivation. And we finally got him back to school, and he was in a wheelchair, and I could take a breath and think, okay, maybe we'll get some normality back again. And then a few weeks later, my dad went into hospital with a suspected gallstone problem. And he came out a few days later with a cancer diagnosis. And over the next 2 weeks, he deteriorated so quickly and sadly died the day after my daughter's birthday, 3rd birthday. And on her actual birthday, I had a call from the hospital to say he was end of life, and I needed to go in and say my goodbyes. But the problem was, on her birthday, I came down with a severe stomach bug and literally couldn't stop being sick. And I lay in bed feeling so ill and thought that I was going to miss saying goodbye to him. So that really was a horrendous situation. And then I navigated my grief over the summer. And then the children went back to school in September, and actually my daughter started nursery at my son's school. So that was great, because I'd only got 1 drop off and 1 pickup now, and she was doing 5 days rather than 3 days. And I was like, wow, I've actually got some breathing space. But when she started school, it came with the inevitable immune system building. And we had weeks where she was off school or unwell. And then in October, my son's school shut for a week due to a massive COVID outbreak. And they did kind of a circuit breaker, and we were back to home learning. So the working mum juggle was real this year, on top of my son's accident and my dad's death. And literally, I think I had 4 months out of the entire year where life has felt reasonably in flow. But the rest of the time, it felt like pushing water uphill or wading through treacle. And I really felt there were some massive learnings in that whole kind of experience. So what were the lessons? Because they were huge. I think a really big one for me was, just because I can keep going doesn't mean I should. I actually found that through this time, I had the inner strength to keep picking myself up and pushing through. But then another life challenge would hit me and kind of knock me over. But I'd pick myself back up again and move forward. But after this kept happening, I had to pause and kind of go, what else is going on here? And I had to really reevaluate my approach to resilience, because it's not just about picking yourself back up. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And actually, these life lessons were really about me surrendering. And at times that felt really hard. But actually, life was telling me that there was no other choice. If I kept pushing, it kept pushing me back. So I kind of was like, this isn't working. Let me try something else. So I leaned into surrendering. And it's a word I feel really uncomfortable saying because it feels like I'm losing my power when I surrender. But actually, if I recognize, and I truly believe this, that resilience is about building the internal capacity to face what life is presenting you with, then sometimes that's about resting, replenishing, reflecting before you can move forward. And actually, the lesson in it was about being kind and gentle with myself as I did that. And as a typical high achiever, and I know my audience, my community, I know you too can relate to being high achievers, that continues to be the work I need to do on myself. How can I be gentle and kind with myself as I navigate difficult times? And as the Michael Singer quote says, that which is holding you down can become a powerful force that raises you up. And I really felt that this year. And I don't know if you can relate to this. Are there times that you need to surrender and let life take you for a little while? Are you naturally resilient? But sometimes can you have too much of a good thing? And moving on to life lesson number 2. And this one is all about what I call intentional margin. This year, with all of its setbacks, taught me I had little margin in my life. When things went wrong, there was just no time to breathe, take stock, and move forward in a grounded way. And not only was that really bad for my nervous system because I felt like I was reacting and having to tap into my adrenaline system to get stuff done, which, if you know my story, after having adrenal fatigue, obviously isn't where I want to be. I had big plans for 2021 and I had important stuff that I wanted to share with you and the world. And I kept finding myself getting caught up in kind of the shallow work of emails, social media, the day-to-day busyness, and also being in constant react time. I wasn't moving my work or myself forward in the ways that I'd intended, and I was getting really frustrated. You know, as my inner critic was saying, why wasn't I being productive enough? Why wasn't I being focused enough? And I was turning those frustrations inwards. But actually, when I took 10 days off in January when I had COVID, I basically said, if I'm home learning and I've got COVID, I'm just going to let everything else go. And I actually felt relatively well when I had COVID, but I knew that I needed to focus on my recovery and my children. So I just let work go for a while. And it was during that space I had this massive creativity surge, and my whole business model and blueprint for working with my clients emerged. And it was a great reminder that intentional margin is so powerful. It's kind of this fertile void where there's power for things to emerge. So my life lesson this year is about creating white space in my days and in my weeks. And I really want to put intentional margin into my schedule so that I've got breathing room and room to expand, you know, my time, my thinking, and just to be. And actually to stop celebrating being busy as a measure of my contribution and importance. But instead, I wanted to celebrate how much intentional margin I have in my life. And it was this year that I discovered the work of Greg McKeown. And I don't know if you've come across him, but he's a Brit who lives in America and has written some really interesting books. And he's kind of a thought leader that's really well recognised in the US and now globally. And he wrote a book called Essentialism. And it's all about the disciplined pursuit of doing less. And when I read it, kind of light bulbs went off in my mind. And it's that recognition that I can do anything, but not everything. And actually the freedom to pursue what really matters is about focusing on what's essential so that I can live my life at my highest contribution. So my life lesson is I want to do less, but better. And as Greg says in his book, to discern what is truly essential, we need space to think, time to look and listen, and permission to play, wisdom to sleep, and the discipline to apply highly selective criteria to the choices we make. And this year, I didn't feel that I did that particularly well. I was in react mode, and I give myself complete grace for it. You know, this year was a year like no other. But actually, I don't want to be like that going forward. So in 2022, I'm going to be focusing on doing less but better. And to help me do this, I've built my dream team around me to help me focus on my zone of genius and to create that white space. And this has been a massive development leap for me. Investing in my team felt scary at times. Is my business in a place where I can make this investment? Can I justify it? But actually, it wasn't about the business. It was about my willingness to let go of doing it all, my willingness to be ready to ask and receive help, and my willingness to step into my personal leadership. So I'm really excited to be going into 2022 with my dream team. I've got Lauren, who's my online business manager. I've got Laura, who's my virtual assistant, and John, my podcast manager. And my word, does that feel good to be able to say that? So do you have intentional margin in your life? If not, what could you do to create it? Is it about scheduling it? Or is it about asking for the help to make it happen? And you might not be in a place to hire people to make this happen, but who in your network could you ask for support? Who could support you? And what permission do you need to do to go and get that support? So life lesson number 3 is about unicorn space. And in September of this year, I undertook the challenge of a lifetime. And I hiked 100 kilometres with about 100 other women for an amazing charity called Copperfield. And you've probably heard me speak about it on my podcast. You probably see me on social media talking about it. And I've already shared that actually when I signed up to do this, there were 1,000,001 reasons for me not to do it. You know, my family responsibilities, my work commitments, my lack of time. And I noticed that leaving my children for a week to do this for what felt like fun, because I wanted to, not because I needed to. At times, I had these feelings of selfishness raised to the surface, and it triggered feelings of guilt, all of which I'm kind of talked about before and feel well versed to handle. But it was a great reminder that our culture we live in tells us that a good mother is selfless, that's constantly there for their children and for others. But I know that I tried that kind of selfless mode of being a mum, and actually it just made me less of myself, and I lost myself, and it meant that I was less of a good mum, not better. So the charity trek was not only an opportunity to raise money for an amazing cause, but for me it was about reclaiming my unicorn space. And I'd underestimated how important that was for me and for my family until I did it. And now you've probably heard me talk about unicorn space before, but if not, it's a term that was coined by a lady called Eve Rodsky, who's phenomenal. She's been on the podcast before, and she talks about unicorn space is this creative, magical space necessary to develop and pursue your passions. But like the mythical equine, it doesn't effing exist until you discover or reclaim it. And so Eve makes this point, everyone needs to have their own unicorn space. But for so many of us, it can seem beyond our reach. And there were 1,000,001 reasons why that trek was beyond my reach. I told myself, not now, when the kids are older, when I'm less busy, when I'm fitter, when I'm less tired, when life feels easier. But I'd realised that I was postponing my life till, I'll do it when. And unless I took the leap to reclaim my unicorn space, my life was going to pass before my eyes. And losing my dad this summer reminded me that sometimes later becomes never. And I don't want to just survive this one precious life. I want to thrive, and I don't want to take regrets to my grave. So while there were 1,000,001 reasons that told me that I shouldn't create that unicorn space, I'm going to do it anyway. And what I discovered from that experience is I came back from that charity trek a changed woman, not only because of the incredible women that I met and kind of how life affirming it was being around these people that had gone through hell and back, but actually having the space just to be me, the space not to be responsible for other humans, and just to kind of be in my own company, doing what I wanted to do, had such an impact on me. The the resentment and the frustration that I could sometimes feel in my life just melted away. And that was just for a while. And actually I realised that since I've come back from the trek, I've not created that unicorn space since. So as I enter 2022, I'm intentionally going to create the space to do things just for me that bring me joy and honour that part of me outside of being a mum and a wife and a businesswoman, because I felt such a visceral impact of doing that. And it had such a profound impact on my family when I came home. I was showing up in the way that I really, really wanted to. And it was just evidence for me that actually, although it can feel selfish to create that unicorn space, actually, I can be there for my loved ones in the way that I want to more when I do it. So what would you do with your unicorn space? What would you do if you could create the time just for you to do something that makes you feel alive? And how can you make that happen? And life lesson number 4 is let it be easy. When life has felt so difficult this year, I found myself wishing it were easier. But I know that just wishing isn't actually going to make the difference. If I want it to be easier, I actually need to do something differently. And I've got a tendency to overcomplicate things, to think if I'm doing them well, that it must take hard work and a lot of effort. And I have a belief that the key to everything is hard work, which has served me well to a point. But I know that any strength that's overdone can actually become a shadow and can trip you into a weakness. But what this year has taught me is that hard work isn't a linear line to success. I actually wanted to make a higher contribution this year, but didn't have the time or energy. I worked hard this year in between all of the life kind of experiences that kept pushing me back. I really worked hard, but didn't move as far forward as this hard work should have taken me. And it was a reminder that working harder isn't always smart. And I had this realisation that life can sometimes be hard, but I don't need to make it harder. I was doing all the right things for the right reasons, but sometimes I was doing them in the wrong way. And it's almost like that Puritan mindset that anything hard is worthy and anything easy is unworthy. And I've known this for a while, and that mindset isn't helpful. And I've been following Kate Northrop's Do Less journey right from its inception in about 2014. And Kate joined me on my podcast show. And if you're interested in learning her Do Less approach, if you go to episode 29, so wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/29, and we talk about the Do Less, the revolutionary approach to time and energy management for busy working mums. And I'd even been part of Kate's membership for a few years. So I logically knew that doing less can sometimes actually free you up to make a higher contribution. But in reflection, I hadn't taken it from my head to my heart, to my hands. And what I mean by that is knowing that it makes sense in the head. I'd taken it to the heart, actually wanting to do that. But on reflection, I hadn't actually taken it fully into my hands about actually doing it. But this year, because I literally couldn't work harder, it really brought this life lesson into focus. So my lesson going into 2022 is to find the easiest path that enables me to do my work at the highest contribution, so I can do the right things, but without burning out. So thinking about what are the minimum steps required for completion. Don't overcomplicate it. Just do the minimum that gives you the highest contribution to completion. And reminding myself that past a certain point, more effort doesn't produce better performance. In fact, it undermines it. You know, how do I remove complexity? And how can I enjoy essential activities rather than enduring? How can I enjoy? So things for me like emptying the dishwasher can feel like a real drag. But if I can put on a good bit of music, it makes it easier. You know, one of my other tasks that I hate is cleaning out the fridge. But how can I make it fun? And often again, it's about putting on music and focusing on how this food feeds my family and keeps us healthy. Because I want it to be easy. And that's my mantra. It's kind of let it be easy. And thinking about who can make it, help make it easier. You know, is there delegation? Is there collaboration? You know, is it about building a high leverage team? And that's what I've done the back end of this year, it's about hiring people in their zone of genius and trusting them that they can do it better than me. Thinking about what can I automate and what rituals can I put in place that just make things easier and more fun. As Greg McKeown states in his book, Effortless, it's all about moving from powerful effort, which can be really exhausting, to effortless power, which is freeing. So moving from that powerful effort to effortless power. And that's kind of the lesson that I'm carrying into 2022. Let it be easy and focus on effortless power. So that's been my lesson for 2021, and I'm really excited to experiment with this in 2022. And there you have it, my 4 life lessons for 2021. So just to recap, the first one was all about resilience, and actually just because you can keep going doesn't mean you should. My second one is all about intentional margin. How do I create that space to think, to create, to be in my life? Lesson 3 is about unicorn space and actually the impact of having that time. And lesson 4 is about let it be easy and focusing on effortless power. So I hope you found these insights into my life lessons in 2021 useful. And I really hope that as you've been listening to them, they've sparked ideas on what your life lessons have been and how you can take the goodness from these into the new year. Thanks so much for hanging out with me in this episode. And could you do me that huge favour, please? Can you share this episode with 2 or maybe 3 working mums that have popped into your head as you've listened? As I said, my mission is to support as many working mums on their journey as possible. And I'd be so grateful if you supported them by offering this free podcast. And I really hope it's been useful for you. And if it has, that you can pass that on to another working mum or 2 or maybe 3. So thanks so much for tuning in. And I hope 2022 is a year of health and fulfillment for you and your loved ones. Until next time, take care. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too, so if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.